A very warm welcome to everybody joining MMA EMEA's webinar series, There is No New Normal, where we broadcast this webinar pretty much every Wednesday at this time. My name is Chris Babiodi, and I'm the MMA EMEA MD. I'm really excited to be your facilitator today. Today's webinar is brought to you with our partners AdColony, and it's focused on gamification, how to best take advantage of the growth in mobile gaming. Before we start, just a couple of points about the MMA. We're a global industry association for marketing, and we're basically here to change the world. Our membership includes pioneering marketers alongside agencies, tech enablers, and publishers. Our priorities focus on business impact and inspiration. And our purpose is all about being able to enable marketers to drive innovation and enduring business value. Benefits for our members are all around shaping the future of marketing. And today is about gamification. And I'm delighted to welcome a host of subject matter experts and industry leaders to this webinar. We've a packed agenda today, 2 sessions that will culminate in an agency and client panel discussion in about 25 minutes from now. And we'll also be giving away 5 sets of Apple AirPods at the end of the panel session in about an hour's time. Names will be chosen at random for those who are live on the call at that point and live with us. Anybody listening to a recording of this webinar after the 20th of January will not be able to participate. So let me now hand over to our first set of speakers. Please welcome Duncan and Tom from Global Web Index.
Thank you so much, Chris. Welcome. I'm so pleased to be able to join you and show you some of our insights around the mobile gaming topic in the UK. So quick introduction. My name's Duncan. I'm an account manager here at GWI based in London. And joining me is my colleague Tom, a member of our trends team and all-round gaming enthusiast.
Hello.
Next slide, please. That's our faces, and you have our email address there. But just to talk you through what we're going to be presenting in the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to be giving you a whistle-stop tour of some of our GWI data to analyze the latest mobile gaming landscape in the UK, as well as addressing some of the biggest stereotypes and potentially misconceptions you may have about this gaming audience and how particular sub-audiences differ in their attitudes and preferences when mobile gaming.
Thanks, Dunk. But just before we get started, I'm going to give you all a brief overview into who we are at GWI. So can we just have the next slide, please? Cheers. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, GWI is a market research company home to the world's largest panel of consumers at 22 million across 46 markets. The insights we'll be discussing today are taken from our ongoing core survey with additional support from our News Zeitgeist dataset. In this presentation, we're going to be using an audience of mobile gamers defined as 16 to 64-year-old internet users in the UK who say they play games on smartphones, tablets, or a feature phone as of Q3 2020. Next slide, please. Just so to kick things off, we're going to set the scene a little bit first and look at the current mobile gaming landscape in the UK and Europe. Next slide. So UK internet users are keen mobile gamers, and 58% define as such. In the past 3 years, however, we've seen the activity explode across other European markets, but seen the UK displaced from the 3rd most prominent market for mobile gamers in 2017 to 13th as of Q3 2020. But when we segment this differently, you'll see that the UK climb up the rankings for older mobile gamers, who we define as Gen X and baby boomers from here on out, and female mobile gamers. Those are 2 audience segments we're going to be paying pretty close attention to today. Next slide, please.
So yeah, more generally in the UK, smartphones continue to be the leading device for gaming. Last year in Q2 2020, we saw mobile gaming jump up to the highest percentage we've seen in the last few years, up to 53% of all UK internet users. And between that wave Q2 and the next Q3, we did see a slight drop from this peak to 51%, but it's still important to remember that this is higher engagement than any wave we saw in 2019, or in fact 2018 before that. And while console gaming has seen a slight increase recently, perhaps in some part caused by the launch of next-gen consoles, it still lies some way off mobile gaming. And this gap is only really likely to increase as smartphones' processing power and other functionalities continue to evolve and accommodate different types of gamers' needs.
And it's also worth reiterating the impact that that first lockdown had on mobile gaming. So in custom research fielded in October, we found that 61% of mobile gamers say they were playing more games since the start of the pandemic. And you take into account that we're in the middle of our third national lockdown right now, it's likely that those same internet users are once again going to turn to mobile games as a popular leisure activity. But what's really important to take note of is who it is that's likely to be doing this. Next slide, please.
So when we're thinking about mobile gaming's future, we really need to look below the surface and understand mobile gamers in a bit more demographically or attitudinally nuanced ways. So generally, males and younger audiences like Gen Z and millennials lead the way for gaming activity across different devices like consoles and PCs. But in the UK, mobile gaming is actually more popular among females than males. In fact, it's been higher in every wave of GWI data since we started tracking this in early 2015. This gap between males and females is most prominent among our youngest age bracket, 16 to 24-year-olds. So while a respectable 64% of 16 to 24 males are mobile gaming in the UK, this rises to an impressive 72% among their female counterparts.
Now, at the same time, older mobile gamers are also on the rise. Though younger audiences have always led for mobile gaming, the percentage of older users playing mobile games rose above 40% in Q2 2020 for the first time, and it hasn't looked back since. I think mobile gaming is just really showing how outdated some of those preconceptions about gaming can be.
Yeah, definitely. And more generally, we've actually shed light on this baby boomer tech trend in our most recent annual trends report, which is called Connecting the Dots, where as a result of the pandemic, we've analysed the effect of older consumers needing to rely on the internet more than ever before. But with this increasing adoption and familiarity of tech among older consumers, inevitably what can follow is a growing awareness of their digital footprint, which I touch more on a little bit later. Next slide, please.
So a little brief history lesson. When I was little, my mum used to use an egg timer to stop me overindulging on the PlayStation. And while times have definitely changed, you can see from this chart on the left that time is still an important factor to all mobile gamers, with 32% saying they worry about spending too much time on mobiles. So among younger and female audiences, who generally spend the most time online, this worry is particularly prominent, which has led to more consumers opting to track and monitor their time online. In the last month, 20% of mobile gamers say they track their screen time or set limits for certain apps, with females in this audience actually 47% more likely to have done either of these things. Now, while younger audiences are more likely than their older counterparts to care about their time online and to try and control it, it's privacy that's an issue that affects all segments here.
Yeah, not older mobile gamers are not actually that far behind other demographics in saying that they worry about how companies are using their data online. As they come to rely on the internet more and more for things like banking, shopping, socializing, and more generally entertainment, this is only likely to increase. And much like how younger audiences are tracking their time online, these older gamers are now looking to safeguard their privacy. Mobile gamers aged 55 to 64 are the most likely to say they prefer to be anonymous online. And we're increasingly seeing older internet users using VPNs, increasing from 19% to 24% in our last 4 waves of data.
Yeah, there's clearly divergent attitudes towards new tech, privacy, and social media that brands just need to understand on a more granular level if they're going to be able to communicate with these audiences more effectively. Next slide, please. Cheers. So we know a little bit more about the UK mobile gaming landscape and the audiences driving it. Now we're just going to take a closer look at the factors behind that engagement. When asked what features matter most in mobile gaming, 56% of UK mobile gamers said the game should be free to download. And that is really important if mobile gaming is going to continue introducing new audiences. Among female or older mobile gamers, for example, a game being free is vital, with these groups preferring a more casual gaming experience. But there are some exceptions among more stereotypical segments who value something more from that gaming experience. For example, younger male mobile gamers are 74% more likely than the average UK mobile gamer to say that online multiplayer is important. And interestingly, they're actually 21% less likely to say a game should be free.
Yeah, the value of free gaming can't really be overstated. But we also can't ignore that committed gamers are now turning to mobiles too, and they're going to expect more from their experience.
games which offer more of these features are going to help positioning mobile gaming as a legitimate alternative to the likes of consoles and PCs. But moreover, it actually reduces any backlash about ads too. 40% of UK mobile gamers say that games should have as few ads as possible, but this drops to 32% among younger segments, who are more likely to see an advert as a value exchange.
So even with mobile gaming getting more serious, there's no denying that there's an ever-present demand for fun, casual experiences too. Among all UK mobile gamers, 55% say the main reason they play games is to either pass the time or to relax and relieve stress. And given the current climate, this makes a lot of sense. The casual nature of gaming appeals to anyone, but it's particularly valued, I think, by female gamers and older gamers. Both of which enjoy dipping in and out of the game when it suits them and taking advantage of the flexibility that this pastime offers.
And you add into account that free gaming is also a priority to these groups, and you can see that despite some huge advancements in mobile gaming, that casual appeal just isn't going away. And if that's not clear from what they expect in games, it couldn't be more apparent from what they're actually playing. Next slide, please. You see, though we're far removed from the days of Snake and on the old Nokia models, you've got gamers today running for these vast open worlds or like fast-paced death matches. And this is why the action and shooter open world genres are getting some serious attention in the last month. That said, we've got to talk about the casual appeal and how important it is to mobiles. And we can't do this without drawing attention to that puzzle genre right there.
So brands are right to be eyeing up these huge scale games as a source of ad opportunity, but the puzzle genre really isn't showing any signs of budging. In fact, it's going from strength to strength, having actually climbed 12 percentage points since Q3 2018. So we're going to see some more committed gaming audiences on mobiles down the line for sure, but this universal appeal of casual genres like puzzles and board games has to be addressed.
So let's look at these preferences by gender. Males generally play shooters, sports and racing titles, while puzzles actually take a bit of a backseat. 36% of male mobile gamers have played one in the last month. But switch to female or older gamers, and puzzle games form a central role in their gaming lives. It's one of the few genres that has a cross-generational, timeless appeal, and that transitions well into mobile gaming.
So whether the key segments of mobile gamers we've discussed today transition to more hardcore gaming habits, or they stay committed to casual gaming for the long term, they will of course remain a staple of mobile gaming in the UK. And so understanding and engaging them should be a priority of anyone looking at the in-game advertising space.
So before handing you back, I'm just going to close off on some of the key things to remember from our webinar. Number one, the smartphone is the leading method for gaming in the UK. And following the outbreak, lockdown-induced cravings have injected this new energy into the activity. Number two, with female mobile gamers outnumbering their male counterparts and older consumers now waking up to gaming, we're actually redefining our previous preconceptions about gaming stereotypes. Number three, overindulgence is something that younger or female mobile gamers are growing increasingly aware of, but at the same time, privacy is always a concern, particularly for older mobile gamers too, with each of these groups now taking further steps to control their online behaviours. And lastly, mobile gaming is getting more serious, but it isn't leaving its roots behind either. The casual style remains an important staple of mobile gaming, and it has that necessary appeal to entice new audiences. Thank you, everyone, and I'm going to hand you back now. Enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Duncan, and thanks, Tom, for those insights and setting up the scene. As I understand it, that report and some of that data can be shared with our audience at a later date if they contact us here at the MMA. So next up, we have a short session on the virtual world of opportunity, and it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Bright, who is the UK country manager at Colony. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. We are showing up on the screen. Lovely. So, afternoon, everyone. I was supposed to be joined by Heather from Boombit for this session this afternoon, but unfortunately she's fallen ill at the last minute. So, as Q&A sessions go, it would have been a bit one-sided. So I've had to quite hastily repurpose that. So. Apologies for that, but what we wanted to talk about was kind of the work that game developers and kind of platforms like AdColony, how we work together to make this kind of engaging, incredible world where, as we describe it, the virtual world of opportunity that is offering up a brilliant market that advertisers can kind of really terms of getting their products in front of the right people. And what makes that so great, kind of some of the key elements as to why that is a great virtual world of opportunity. So one of the things I've worked in digital and specifically mobile for many years, and the environment that the game developers like Zynga, Rovio, Boombit have created does offer up enormous potential. But kind of the three things I just wanted to kind of really highlight here for me, they're the standout features, which are stunning creativity. We'll come on to some of those in a second, but kind of what the technology through in-app enables is amazing in terms of really immersing the user in something, immersing them in your brand, the message, but pulling them into that, getting them to engage. And so we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Also enormous scales. The guys, thank you, the guys from Tom Duncan from GWI, brilliant insight into kind of where the market's going and dispelling some of those myths about whether it's teenagers in their bedrooms and kind of the old stereotypes. And one of the crucial things, when all this works and when all this comes together, the scale and the creativity, it's then the performance that it generates. It's how that kind of ties together, and then it ticks off many of the kind of the media metrics. And one of the things I wanted to touch on, and unfortunately not discuss with Heather today, but was to talk about kind of going beyond media metrics and actually kind of impactful metrics. So one of the things, if I dive into the creativity side, so if we have the next slide, please. I've got a couple of videos, which always have to be a bit careful with the sound. So I'm just going to, if we play that video, please, that'd be great. Here we go. So this is enabled through the technology within kind of particular ad colony campaign that we did with P&G. So you can't do this within kind of a YouTube creative or standalone video. So the creativity and what's the kind of the in-app world through the SDK and the partnerships between publishers, by creating that tactile environment where users are used to engaging with their handsets. I've had to hide my phone so it doesn't buzz away with my team heckling me from afar. But usually you've got your handset when you're playing a game pressed within arm's length of your phone. You've got two hands, you're looking at it closely, you're tapping away. And it's that engagement, that kind of ability to be creative and how you pull users into it. One of the things here is one of a campaign we ran in Q4 was a toothbrush. And I love this from kind of how much creativity you can put into marketing a toothbrush. It's a very impressive toothbrush, of course, but all of these different things where you can, the user is there, they're used to tapping away, they're dragging, they're flicking things across the screen. And so what we do is at the end of that video message, you've got the ability to enhance that. You can pull them into learning more about that. And whether it's a toothbrush, whether it's promoting the latest cinema release or different things like that, that creativity is just, you can't do that in other channels. And I think that the work with the environment that the app developers provide and create is really getting users into that kind of engaged state where they're happy to have the sound on, they're happy to see an advert, they're opting into it. So one of the things that we work very closely with game publishers on, developers on, is making that opt-in format. So users are choosing to do this and they're actually kind of opting in to watch that content. The crucial bits is then kind of what happens afterwards. And I'll come on to the performance in terms of kind of when they're engaging with that. Probably the largest part of the conversation I was going to have with Heather was around the scale. Kind of one thing I was going to talk about was kind of Boombit's biggest titles. I think we've done about 36 million, just over 36 million downloads last year. Probably, and it could be, and it's probably easier for me to say this without Heather sat kind of on the screen with me, but it's probably not what I would classify as a household name, but it did 36 million downloads last year. For context, from the figures I could get hold of, Call of Duty, the biggest, and probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest console title, their biggest sales figures to date are about 31 million. So you've got an enormous console brand like Call of Duty is 31, yet kind of a single app from one of our developers that's done 35 million, 36 million. So it just starts to give you an idea of the scale that we're talking about here. In the UK ad colony, we see kind of 40 million uniques across the market. And one of the great things of, obviously we work very closely with those game developers on, is the breadth of those titles. And so in terms of like some of the genres that the guys just talked about there, kind of puzzle games and fashion. It's a new world for me watching my daughter interact with her phone as some of the fashion apps that she gets involved with. Cooking, puzzles, all these different types of things. And that kind of scale only works when you can then offer that variety. So the developers have a huge role in creating that landscape that is then obviously the knock-on effect, and kind of the hope and the desire for that is to create a great target audience. If you've got scale across all of those kind of segments, then you can do something with it. Whether you're promoting a toothbrush, or we can move on to other things and see the next video, please. You can then cut up the audience that way. So that scale really is a huge part. One of the things, and yeah, let's play that, please, Gabby. That's great, thank you. Also kind of mentioned about performance. Because users are in that mindset, because users are used to having the sound on because they're engaging with the games, is when an advert appears, that one, they've opted into it, but two, they're in that engaged state. So what that generates is incredible figures, incredible performance for campaigns. So depending on kind of what you can do from how you want to do it from a buying metric point of view, but we have, like, the market sees incredible completion rates. Like we're within Ad Colony across the UK, we see around 95% completion rates as an average. But one of the crucial things is that's just a media metric, like just having a completion rate of 95%. What's that actually mean to your budgets? And surely kind of the perfect thing is actually high engagement. It's high dwell times where people are then going, okay, you know what, this is a interesting piece of content. And if Ad Colony, we've done our job in terms of the right targeting and the right timing and all of that, that actually that user, it's not a jarred experience. They've opted in, they've seen something that is relevant to them. And then what we see in this particular example through Porsche is the dwell times that this generated when users were like, they could get their hands on it, they could interact, they could move around it like no other media kind of offers. So rather than just kind of video at scale, you can really then take that further. You can enhance that message. And I think that what we see through that in terms of engagement levels, over 200% on a lot of our campaigns before Christmas, that you've got users that are willing to do that. They're there to be entertained. And so kind of quite happily getting their hands on a creative, and this particular one, it's a beautiful sports car that you can drag around. And particularly in this time with COVID challenges and lockdown, that this particular one, we're trying to recreate a virtual test drive because users, consumers couldn't get into showrooms. This is how we could bring this to life using the technology. Without that kind of balance between app developers and kind of monetization through ad revenue, it's just not possible. So it's a real fine balance that if you look at the kind of, I said, 40 million uniques across our side, if you look at the numbers and the engagement and the dwell time, you can see that that really is a success. So one of the things kind of we talk about virtual world of opportunity, it's huge in terms of the engagement. Said that creativity, the scale, and then also kind of getting proper performance, not just media metrics, but actually kind of rather than a completed view, it's someone seeing and hearing your video as the creative agency designed. So perfect. That was hastily repurposed. So Chris, I'll hand back over, but if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to pick up on social afterwards, but look forward to the rest of the seminar. So thank you very much.
Chris, thanks very much for those case studies. And I do know that Ad Colony have won a large number of golds in our MMA Smarties Awards, especially in gamification. So well done to Ad Colony. So next up, we move on to the all-important subject of brand safety. And I'm pleased to introduce, to talk about a safe pair of hands, is Sevan from Group M.
Hi, everyone. Thanks to MMA and Ad Colony for inviting me today. I'm here, as the title says, to tell you about the all-important topic. Well, not the most, but quite important topic of brand safety in gaming. So one of the first questions I always get about gaming, and speaking about brand safety in gaming, but is there scale? And maybe if we see the next slide, we will see that yes, there is scale. While the growth in gaming, according to these to these charts, is not great. Still, around 40% of all UK or of the entire UK population plays one game or the other. In China, currently in 2021, also around 40%, and then we can see also in US that the percentage is actually going quite up. So having said that, when we consider, next slide please, when we consider gaming is quite a unique channel. And why it's a unique channel? Because it brings together complexities across the board, different devices, different audiences, different supply paths, and etc. The main four challenges when we speak about brand safety in gaming is that one, it attracts young and engaged audiences, including children. And the children, and we will get to it a bit later, while they're not the only ones playing, as we've seen in Duncan's and Thomas's presentation, they're still there. The second one is, maybe the right word is not lack of measurement standards, it's also lack of and low adoption when available, which makes the optimization and the actual measurement harder. Brand safety or suitability in total is an issue, because in gaming there are all kinds of different games. We've seen there are shooting games, then there are games in which profanity may be a bit more pronounced and highlighted. And then finally, supply path really varies. So it varies by device, whereas you can do it in-app, through CTV, desktop, and etc. Because we are here today to speak about mobile, I'll mostly focus on mobile in a few slides, but I wanted to bring this up because part of why sometimes we hear that marketeers and agencies are steering away from gaming is because they find it complex, and it is complex, but it can be resolved and it can be navigated with the right tools. So hopefully today should provide you with a bit more clarity on things. So next slide. Part of the challenge when it comes to gaming is really the wide array of the devices that games are played on. You can play it on desktop, you can play it on console, and you can play it on mobile in-app. And then all of this, or majority of this, can actually be streamed through different platforms that are well known onto other types of other devices. So if you go to next slide, and the next, the first type of risk that we consider here is the adjacency risk, because when you speak about brand safety and suitability, actually more about suitability, the greatest risk is the actual adjacency to content that is unsuitable or unsavory, or whichever other words you would like to use. So focusing on if you look into streaming platforms, the most common advertising is pre-roll, mid-roll, and etc. And obviously these kind of placements do carry some risk because they're integrated directly into the content. And then if you go to mobile in-app or interstitial, be it a video or display, the mobile in-app games really vary, and we've seen in the first presentation, they can be as harmless as Angry Birds, if you believe that Angry Birds are harmless, but they can also contain a lot of harmful content. So the recommendation here is really to work with your suppliers, to work with your and to understand the type of games that your brand would be associated with. Buy an inclusion list, full transparent or pre-vetted games and apps. And obviously, if you're advertising sensitive products or gay or age-restricted products such as HFSS or alcohol, we must ensure, and we will speak a bit later about how we must ensure that these games are not particularly targeting children. And the final is the final adjacent risk is in-game, which is a very new breed, but it's the talk of the town as well, where you have, while you're playing the game, there is a nice banner. You see you can see an example on the slide. There is a nice banner of a brand while you're playing a game, so it does not interrupt the game. It's very much in flow. Next slide. So as I said, the overarching risk are not children, but the actually targeting children when we are not supposed to do it. And as you can see here, it is a bit outdated, but you know, in 2019, children in the UK aged 12 to 15 spent almost 12 hours on a weekly basis playing games. In France, 40% of children 6 to 14 play games 1 to 2 hours on a daily basis. So if you are an HFSS advertiser or alcohol or gambling, it is not only an ethical duty, but it is actually a legal duty to avoid targeting children and to target away from them. Apart from this, there is also a risk of processing personal data of children, even for monitoring or even for reporting, without parental consent. Obviously, when you work, you know, when you are such an advertiser, or even if you are targeting similar apps, you must take due diligence, and there are ways to go around this. You can use. There are, first of all, suppliers who are able to help you, and also you can again vet the applications, the apps that you would be advertising on, and ensure by using different data points that those applications and apps are not particularly targeting children and do not have a significant percentage of children's audience. Next slide. Having said that, mobile in-app general risk, I've divided it here in 4 areas. One is viewability. If you have ads that are unmeasurable for viewability, you don't know what's the percentage and how long your ad has been viewed. In order to facilitate that, the adoption of open measurement SDK from IB Tech Lab is absolutely crucial. So if you do, the recommendation here is that if you do buy mobile in-app, prioritize apps with open measurement SDK integration, and prioritize those aggregators who actually take this quite seriously, and obviously deploy third-party verification to measure the viewability. When it comes to invalid traffic, it is invalid traffic in in-app is just a pain point, as in any other channel. So the recommendation is always bind an inclusion list of vetted apps, buy apps at .txt inventory, use tags certified supply chain, and the most important thing about fraud is to regularly evaluate, deliver reports, and optimize your campaigns. When it comes to brand safety and suitability, I won't repeat myself too much. It's really an inclusion list and understanding the transparency of your buys. And finally, something that people often forget is precise geolocation. Precise geolocation is a highly sensitive. It's a highly sensitive thing for anybody to know about you as a consumer. So if you don't want to share it and you're found to be targeted just because you're standing on the crossroad of certain streets or next to a shop, there could be there can be repercussions in terms of not only reputational repercussions if you're caught to be doing that, but also legal repercussions. So we always ensure a high measure of due diligence with local privacy regulations, and always question your vendors. If you're using precise geolocation, how did they get to it? What kind of consent have they received, and etc. Going to the next slide. Next slide, please. So to summarize everything, 3 main watchouts, or actually many watchouts, but just divided in 3 groups. One is transparency and control. Whoever you work with, is you must ask questions such as, can I access and receive a report on ad placement? Can I implement inclusion or exclusion list? Can I activate only on apps -ads.txt supplied? Can I activate only on open measurement SDK inventory? How detailed are reports? Can I track? Can I see everything? And can I, spot fraud if I look into those delivery reports? Measurability. Is there third-party verification? And do actually vendors that you work with operate certain proprietary or in cooperation with third-party vendors checks internally? Are they working with known vendors in this space? And the thing that often people forget is the legal check. Does the vendor offer refund in case fraud is identified? And what is the takedown window? Because it can happen that you must remove your campaigns because you must pause them or because something was going wrong. And in that case, you really want to ensure that you can do that very easily with your vendor. Having said that, I'd like to thank you. And if you do have any questions, please reach out to me. There is my email at the end of this presentation in the next slide, but you can also find me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Stefan, thanks very much indeed. And now it's time for our agency and marketer panel. But just before I hand over to Andy, who's going to moderate this, I would just like to remind those of you still on this webinar that we're giving away 5 sets of AirPods at the end of this marketeer session. Names are going to be chosen at random from those who are participating and still remain live on this call. However, I must say that anybody listening to a recording of this webinar after today, the 20th of January, will not be able to participate. So without further ado, let me hand over to Andy, who's our moderator today. And for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to have a discussion with our multiplayer panel.
Thanks very much, Chris. As Chris said, I'm joined today by 3 people. Emma Jane from Camelot. So we've got the marketeers, the client's perspective, and then 2 people from the agency world, Dan from Mindshare and Luke from Dentsu. So to kick off, first, for all 3 of you, you're obviously very active within gaming. And so to kick this off, I'm going to come to you first, Emma Jane. If you could briefly discuss what is attractive from your perspective, from a client perspective, within gaming, and what learnings have you been able to draw specifically from the last year or so, 2020 onwards?
Okay, thank you, Andy. In terms of what attracts us as a client, I mean, the stats speak for themselves, what all of the speakers have spoken about today. I mean, there's a huge opportunity within this environment. It's massively gaining traction with its valuable inventory and a very engaged audience. And so I don't think when we're looking at our media plans, it's something that we can ignore, nor should we ignore, even if it is a bit different, a bit unknown, and potentially, arguably, a bit harder to get sign off on. It's definitely something we need to lean in on and explore more. We're still learning, and we've very much got a test and learn approach still. But in terms of 2 big pieces of advice, I'd say my number 1 is don't rush it. We're a regulated business, so brand safety, geo, age targeting, day parting are hugely important for us. And you're going to have to tailor your approach in this space. It's not something you can lift and shift from your other channels. And it really does take that due diligence to cover off everything that Stefan was just talking about. And that due diligence takes time. So it's important not to rush it and ensure that you're really comfortable and that you're tailoring your strategy for your industry and your brand needs to make sure that you're getting out there in a really brand safe way. I'd say my second learning has really been to try and understand what the role of the gaming opportunity gives you in your plan in terms of how it works alongside your other channels in your digital marketing mix. And then once you really understand this, that allows you to have fun. And as Chris was talking about, really tailor that creative. It sounds really simple, but you'll definitely get more benefits when you can tailor your creative and your formats and really try to integrate them into the gaming experience. It's not just another channel where you can deliver your standard IAB assets and hope that they perform. The more you can tailor and do rich, engaging formats and experiences, the better benefits that you'll see.
That's lovely. Thank you, Emma Jane. Both for Dan and Luke, I'm going to come to you first, Dan. But Emma Jane referenced there about it can be sometimes quite tough, maybe internally getting sign-off. So a generic sort of thing to you both, what are some of the key learnings you've been able to identify over the last 12 months or so? But if either of you have got anything that talks about maybe some of those challenges of either getting internal planners or indeed clients to sign off greater proportions to gaming, I'd also be interested to hear about that. So Dan, why don't you go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I think, as you mentioned, that is definitely a challenge, is, unfamiliarity, sometimes internally, sometimes externally, with the gaming space and what it has to offer. One of the easy ways I personally been able to get around that is the confidence that we can work with some of the gaming partners and putting them on plan, knowing that they have the ability to optimize towards the performance metrics we're setting. And that means that we can then have the confidence that the partners we put on plan will deliver against a client objective. So it's almost a no risk when we're paying on a CPI for an app user acquisition campaigns, and we're setting client objectives around performance post install, so clear KPIs and effective CPAs after the install has happened, and we get partners that are able to hit those. It's really easy. It's really easy for the planning teams. It's easy for the execution teams that enjoy working with partners on a performance basis. And maybe historically we've worked on metrics like CPM and CPC. To be able to work on something a bit further down the line just makes our job as an agency a lot easier.
Thanks, Dan. Luke, what would you add in this space about learnings from the last 12 months or so?
Yeah, I think Daniel's points were spot on there. I'll start with a positive, which I'll say that things are getting a lot easier. I think a year ago, approaching brands about gaming as a whole, as a sort of holistic piece, the stereotypes that existed were still pretty pervasive, and you had to do a lot of work to break those down. I think the key there for us was just, being patient, communicating the facts in a clear and concise manner, backing them up with data, and also talking about the need to build long-term relationships as well with gaming organizations, because they know what makes their audience tick, and they can help us all come along the journey and understand gamers a little bit better. A year later, we're in a slightly different position, I would say. I think most of the marketers that we speak to now are actually aware of the opportunity in gaming, and really they want to know more about how their brand can specifically get involved. So it's a slightly different conversation, but certainly the education piece is still an important one, and will continue to be probably for a good while longer. But as I said, patience and clarity of communication is key.
I'm just going to pick up on some of those points, Luke and Dan, that you've made. I'm sort of going to skip slightly ahead of where we might have been going. Just talk a little bit more about that market and the maturing market. And really, again, a question back for you, Dan and Luke, is that, historically, I can imagine that you were sort of trying to batter down doors internally to actually get in front of marketeers, because it wouldn't surprise me if you were almost not an afterthought, but to get the airplay you might have wanted to in front of clients could have been really, really difficult. Obviously, we're seeing, you're both saying that's beginning to improve, but I can only imagine in the very large organizations that you work in, you're spread reasonably thin. So how do you prioritize and make sure you do get the airspace in front of, you've got myriads of clients to work with. So how do you go about that? So Dan, why don't I go back to you first?
So that's a really good question. I think the first way I'd answer that is education, so that we can't rely on one or two people being the driving force or the ambassadors for performance planning within agencies, within that, the broad set of people we work with. So ensuring we educate both internally and externally, either ourselves running training, bringing in external partners that can share insights, like some of the partners we have on the panel and in the audience today. That's absolutely important. And I'm also not afraid to put those same partners in front of clients. As as much as we love to regurgitate information that we're told, it's equally important that we get the partners with first-hand knowledge in front of clients that can really just delve into some of the more granular detail about where their audiences are within those gaming environments.
Okay, Luke, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with those sentiments as well, and we've done some of those things too. You can't overstate the importance of simple sort of dogged determination and persistence. So we've been banging the drum as loudly as we can to anyone who'll listen. And I think what was really important for us early on is getting the support of the senior leadership to get behind us, and put us in front of leaders within the business who could then disseminate that information across the network, and identifying people that are really interested in gaming and marketing in your organization is very important as well, because there'll be cheerleaders and champions for everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of all these things, but really it has come down to just consistent hard work and determination.
Okay, Emma-Jane, I'm going to come back to you as well just on this, but just an observation, because it's from a client perspective. I've talked to a number of clients recently, and the amount of them that say, "Oh, I've appointed somebody, in my team who's quite young and they're quite into gaming, so I've given them the gaming brief." So Emma-Jane, I'd be really interested, particularly for the type of client, as you've said, highly regulated, and I'm sure you've face some of these sorts of challenges internally, but are you beginning to see other marketeers' perspectives change about gaming and actually seeing it as more of a mass market opportunity?
Definitely, and we really should be, because the reach is definitely there, and also the robust targeting you can do means that you can arguably reach audiences that you're struggling to reach in other channels. And I think very similar to what Luke and Daniel have talked about, when it works best is when you're coming together with a partner and the agency and your internal team to really do the due diligence and to really prove kind of what you're trying to do and that it's been done before and that it is brand safe. And I think the more you can work together in that partnership mentality, the more that gaming is seen as a really important part of your channel mix. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, it shouldn't be sat over there as a different brief to tick that. Yeah. It actually has a role in a lot of the briefs that we're working on because it is reaching a core audience and it has got that huge potential.
I'm sure that on that last comment, there's probably a lot of people listening in who are very, very pleased to hear that it's playing a central role. Mm-hmm. So just to move on from there, and again, all three of you have touched upon this to some extent, and I just want to talk about the environment, because clearly the opportunity within the gaming arena for environment is absolutely fantastic. And historically, advertisers and agencies often place a huge amount of focus on environment, and we all can talk fantastically about how great the environment is and how great the creative opportunity can be used in certain places. So again, just thinking about what's happened in the last 12 months, lots of sort of quite bad news stories out there with COVID, but Duncan and Tom from GWI both talked about what a high proportion of the gaming community actually use games to relax and pass time. So clearly it's a very rich environment. And I'll come to you first, Luke, just from an environment perspective. How are you beginning to see this area evolve and this become a more powerful tool for you when you're talking to clients?
Yeah, well, environment will always be important. And in gaming, like other media types, you need a really strong understanding of context, both of the environment, the game in which you're playing, but also the player base as well. It's a bit different to say running across news websites or YouTube, because games don't change as much. A racing game won't suddenly become a shooting game without any warning, for example. You wouldn't have Formula One suddenly decide to put rocket launchers on their cars and shoot each other off the track. It will stay a racing game. So there's an element of security there. But in terms of whether a brand is suitable or not is a bit more nuanced. So in terms of like a happy place, some people might consider Candy Crush or Fall Guys their happy place, whereas others might not at all. They might find joy playing UFC or Call of Duty. So happy place isn't necessarily a targeting parameter that we can control our side. It very much depends on the individual. So we think more about that context and brand suitability piece. And, you know, using the UFC as an example, a luxury fashion brand wouldn't want their logo on the UFC canvas where, you know, punches and elbows are being thrown in the game. Whereas a sports fashion brand like Reebok, who actually sponsor the UFC and all the fighters wear Reebok when they compete, that's exactly where they'd want to be. So two clothing brands, but with entirely different contexts. So it's very nuanced, and that's for us why you need to understand the gaming environment you're in great detail.
So Dan, I'm going to ask you slightly different. I just want you to think and build upon what Luke is saying there. That there's obviously just so many opportunities out there. So how do you decide as a team, and how, you know, and working with clients to actually decide which platforms, and then within those platforms, which games you should actually be placing specific clients on? Because there's too much out there for a scattergun approach. So how do you go about that?
It's a real challenge. I think the contextual diversity within gaming is probably something that's quite hard to detail out to traditional clients. You know, understanding the different demographics of audiences between Candy Crush and Clash of Clans is a challenge to talk them through. So what we generally do is we take an audience first approach, and no matter where our audience is, we make sure our clients understand that these games contain those demographics. In terms of detailing out like how we list out the games they should go on, we generally work, and this type kind of talks upon what Stephen mentioned on inclusion lists. So we look at drawing up inclusion lists with certain partners where we've got brands that are concerned about brand safety within particular categories. Working to inclusion lists is really, really important. It also helps us identify the partners that are willing to be transparent, that have enough knowledge of the inventory they're buying across. If they're unable to work to inclusion lists, we'll look at category blacklists as a second choice. Again, there are some challenges within category blacklists because of how some of the apps and games list themselves. You know, historically,
can I just sorry to cut across you. I just want to ask you about that, because I think that's really important. You know, how do you as a team, how can you actually work through and truly understand what's being put in front of you by your partners? Because to your point, that they can call something one thing, and when you actually look at it, it could be something incredibly different. So how do you identify the correct platforms?
We initially started working with more performance network-led partners with great success. These sort of partners are fantastic at delivering against the performance KPIs we set. And now as an agency, we're sort of looking to work more directly with inventory sources. So we're connecting our DSPs to SSP inventories, working with the likes of Pubmatic to look at the app inventory they have available, looking at some of the larger scale partners like Unity Ads and Liftoff, and also equally Ad Colonies, IronSource, so partners that have access to their own SDK-based inventory, where we'd be more confident that they have that granular detail we need. Where we see the gaps, and then we have a choice of whether we work with partners like that, and it's something we put in front of our clients. So we'll position some partners as being on plan to deliver very specifically against the performance KPIs we set, versus other partners where, you know, we may be buying on a CPC, but we can be more confident that they've got a greater level of detail and knowledge about the inventory they're buying. So it's a choice we have to make every time, and it depends on the client.
Okay, I'm very conscious of time, so I'm actually going to finish, but I'm going to go to Emma Jane just to finish off, and then I'm going to hand back to Chris. So Emma Jane, how do you then as a client, do you work hand in hand? Do you rely on your agency to identify the games you should be on? How involved are you? And one add-on to that, do you ever then get people internally coming to you and saying, I either saw Camelot on XYZ, or my kids did, or anything like that? So yeah, how do you work as a client to make sure your brand's appearing in the right place?
And we're very involved, potentially maybe sometimes to the point of annoying, but because it is such an important area, and as we've talked about a lot, that brand safety concern is paramount for us, and we do get really involved, and we kind of work with the partner and the agency to really tailor our own inclusion lists. And that includes going through all the app lists and all the inventory and all the games, testing them and creating our own list that we're comfortable and really cherry picking where we're comfortable advertising, and very much testing and learning and iterating from there.
Okay, that is lovely. I think that sort of probably sums up, I think, one of the big challenges generally for this area is just the opportunity that is out there. And actually, if you're a provider, how do you get yourself top of that list and get yourself in front of people like Luke, Dan, and indeed Emma Jane? And on that, I'm going to hand you back to Chris.
Andy, that's great. And our esteemed panel, thank you very, very much. And now we're coming towards the end of our session, this 1 hour. We've got 11 people through the system and presenting to you. So without further ado, let's get into the names that will be chosen at random in order to win a AirPod. So the names I have in front of me, let me just read them out to you, if you don't mind. So I have Eldon Kate, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing them correctly. I have Marta Bukabi. I have Charlotte Ince, Michelle Meehan, and Ben Flux. So well done to all of you. We'll make arrangements as to how that all happens. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to say thank you to our speakers today, our panelists and our subject matter experts. It's also my pleasure to thank you, each and every one of you who've attended this webinar. It has been recorded. There will be copies. I think the report from Global Web Index will also be available if you reach out to us. This webinar, which we run different subjects pretty much every Wednesday about this time, as I said a little earlier. This has been an MMA EMEA webinar production. There is no new normal. Until next time, stay at home, stay healthy, and stay safe. If you have been lucky enough to win an AirPod, please just connect with us through the chat and let us know you're still here and your email, and we'll make arrangements for it.